Hi, I'm Roger Durst. I'm here proudly celebrating 100 years of engineering manufacturing here in Sydney. This company's been established since 1918 by my grandfather, then my father, my brother and myself have been involved in it for the last 45 years. So why don't you come upstairs and I'll proudly show you some of our archives. This is a lovely old poster showing the company back in 1918. And this poster depicts what we do nowadays in 2018. Heavy duty industrial, mining, automotive and marine equipment for the charging, testing of batteries and also jump-starting systems. And of course we still do our smart chargers and inverters for the marine market as well. This photograph just shows an exhibition, my grandfather, John Durst, electrical expert, 1922, Sydney Town Hall. What stands out the most is this wonderful hand-painted, this is Australian made. And even nowadays, in 2018, we proudly are Australian made. Welcome to my office, and on the wall are just a few lovely old photographs that just show the history of the company and the founder, my grandfather. Here's a lovely old magazine, dates back to 43, it's Fairway. Well, let's go further back, because I think if we go into the box here, we'll find some beautiful old photographs. Lovely old manufacturing photo where they're making the stators for electric motors. And here's another beauty. My grandfather, back in those days, in his shed, tinkering away with all his inventions. What a wonderful era. That's 100 years ago. Well, there's an early photo of, I think it's a 2027 Nash outside the works. Beautiful photo of my grandfather and father. That'd be in probably the late 40s, I would suspect. And another lot of inventions of my grandfather's. He was pretty young there. I've just come across an advertisement in a magazine for a Polystat, wonderful old electrical magazine, when he was in 72 Liverpool Street. So that would have been, that's 1918. That gear, all sorts of other generators. We still have those original brochures. He had patents on everything. I mean, he was a real inventor. So he would, I can't imagine how many patents he actually had all over the years. But just amazing the number of products. We actually had a customer come in probably 10 or 15 years ago he'd seen this photo somewhere and he actually brought in the old electric motor. We still have it. A lot of this equipment that we had archived away, we donated to a museum up in Tamworth, because in actual fact he applied for a job up in Tamworth, because Tamworth was the first town to have electric street lighting, even before Sydney, believe it or not. So they've got a designated electrical museum up there, Tamworth Electrical Museum. And it's perpetual, it's there forever, run by council, and we've got a heap of his electric motors and other product that he invented. So that's the old Polystat medical apparatus. And that's him coming through, I think it was Egypt. He was setting up power stations before he arrived in Australia. So he arrived in 1910, so he had an interesting life before he even arrived here. Here's the lovely old Harmer and Heath. We used to make the synchronous motors for the movie cameras. It's them purchasing land in Auburn, £400 an acre. Look at that fabulous letterhead. That one. And that's a company that my grandfather owned that made electric light fittings. There are virtually hundreds of lovely old advertisements and letters from people, lovely testimonials. Durst Electric, John Durst and Son in Spring Street. So they all stayed virtually in a city. That's the very early letterhead of 72 Liverpool Street. Federal income tax. Well, there you go. He paid his taxes. More requests for electric motors. Ronaldson Brothers and Tippett Proprietary Limited, largest manufacturers of engines, requesting quotes and orders. John Heine and Son, big press manufacturers, and their purchases back in 1936 of us buying those presses. Various telegrams of people ordering product and working with defence. Lovely stamp. Sorry, you owe us nothing. Chrysler Australia. More requests for orders and product. City County Council. I just like the lovely old letterheads of how people did business. 1936. More presses from John Heine. Ingot Metals. Australian manufacturer. This came out, I think this actually came out on a weekly basis, and it's a foolscap publication, and it's quite thick. 1934. It just shows the number of manufacturers and suppliers just based in Sydney. It's sensational. I just love the old graphics and the fact that so much product was made locally. This is an article in that actual magazine of furnace that my grandfather made, and again his workshop. And that's a classic photo of grandfather and father. So I think Dad was 16 in that photograph. Lad for BHP. They've grown. Buyer's Guide, lovely old print here, and great way to advertise in those days. Front cover off, again, Australian manufacturer, 1942. There's the exhibition in 1922, Sydney Town Hall, and there's a little sign that he had made up as well. The wonderful, this is Australian made. Coming into slightly later, this would be the 1950s, I'd say. Bench grinders, all shapes and sizes. They made a lot of bench grinders. The way my father would sell them to Public Works and the Education Department, he'd get the buyer in the factory here, and he'd jam a piece of steel into the grinding wheel and the tool holder. Not very appropriate, but it was accepted in those days. He'd turn it on. He'd then take the buyer out for a lunch, maybe a couple of beers, and then he'd come back, and that grinder would have been humming away with it jammed, purposely jammed, and he'd pull the piece of steel out and the grinder would start up automatically without burning out. It just proved how bulletproof it was. And he'd say, now how many would you like? It was a good sales pitch, and they made many. And they're still being sold on eBay and Gumtree. It's amazing. They just keep going and going. Much like our peanut butter machines do nowadays. This is a lovely old photograph. This was taken in Leighton Street, and grandfather's up here and staff are all down here, and they were making, again, electric motors and grinders in those days. This photograph up here is in his backyard at Haberfield, and he would just tinker. That's my grandfather. That's my father at age 16. Grandfather on the right. Up here, this is Agquip, a company that he had that made electric light fittings. Now, specially designed so they were vandal-proof. They couldn't take the globe out easily and pinch those. So the classic. Now this is the vehicle is I think it's a 24 New Era, very rare. But what he ended up doing with the car is he pulled it apart. He used every component out of the car to make up all sorts of other machines to make up his light fittings, to make up electric motors, notching machines, all sorts of bits and bobs, down to this is the front seat off the new era that he turned into a couch. So nothing went begging. Over here, again, it's another style of polystat machine, I believe, and the man himself. He was born in Switzerland, in Lintel, which is about an hour south of Zurich, little town near the Brown Mountains. And he did his time apprenticeship with Brown Boveri and then decided to travel. And he went through Europe and Egypt setting up power stations. He was pretty advanced for that because he was only young. And then he arrived in Australia in 1910, worked for the City of Sydney Council. They were doing a lot of converting from DC to AC electric motors and all sorts of other applications. So he'd spent quite a bit of time there. And then in 1918 he started the business in 72 Liverpool Street. And he was the first to make electric motors in Australia. And you can see both he and my father were real inventors. Their passion wasn't the business itself, it was the passion and enjoyment of making and inventing product. So they worked well together, and then John and I became involved in the business in 1973, straight after school, and we've been here for only 45 years or so. But the business has grown from various products that they are making to all the products that we do nowadays. And again, I keep harping back, Australian made. And I get such a thrill, all this product from our premises here in the inner city of Sydney, going out all over the world. It's just, I get a real thrill out of that. I feel very proud to be an Australian manufacturer.